Ahoy hoy! How are you all today? Thanks for joining me, Axel Wilkinson, once again for this tutorial on the lens dirt effect in HitFilm 2 Ultimate. If you've kept up with our HitFilm tutorials much, you may have caught on to a running joke about how Simon seems to be incapable of opening HitFilm these days without applying lens dirt to something. But there is a reason he uses it so often, and in fact so do I. Lens dirt does an excellent job of adding realism to your composites and making them feel less digital. Let's have a look, shall we? This project comes to me courtesy of Simon, who has naturally already added a lens dirt effect on this top grade layer. If you compare this version of the shot, which is clean, to this second version, which has lens dirt added, you can see how the lens dirt makes things a bit less sterile and artificial. It's not a magic fix-all. Any composite will use a number of tools and techniques to properly blend things together. In this case, we've used not only lens dirt, but a film damage effect and some grain to improve the composite. But lens dirt is a great tool to have in your arsenal and to be familiar with for when the situation calls for it. So first, let's look at exactly what lens dirt does. I'm going to take this copy of the effect, which has actually already been all dialed in for this shot, and I'm just going to reset it to all its defaults. So here we have lens dirt applied, as I mentioned, to a grade layer above everything else in the shot. So we have the option of selecting a specific layer as the light source for the lens dirt effect. With the default setting of none, all of the layers that exist below the lens dirt effect on the timeline will be combined to create the source. So in cases where you're using the lens dirt as a grade over the entire scene, leaving the light layer at none is an excellent choice. Let's go ahead and take the blur off and set the pivot angle to 0, then change the blend mode to none. Now set the threshold to 0, and you can see that the lens dirt effect is duplicating our footage, rotating the copy 180 degrees, and combining it with the original to create the light map on which the effect will be based. Look for the copy of the ship as I jump through the timeline here, and it should be easy to spot. There's a dirt map involved as well, which we'll discuss later, but right now focus on the way our footage is copied and flipped to create the light map. So this is based on the behavior of actual lens elements and creates a realistic effect which is unique to every shot you apply it to. So, using our frame as a source, this copy is then blurred several different ways via the blur and pivot angle controls. Then it's filtered through a dirt map, which is what creates all these little blurred areas and then the specks of dirt on the lens. There's a procedural dirt map built into the effect, and you can use the seed control here to change the shape of the map that's being used. So every seed setting has a different, unique dirt map, so you can change that around if you want. We also have the option of selecting a custom map based on another layer in our composite using this dirt layer menu. Generally though, the built-in maps work quite nicely and they're super convenient, so we're going to stick with them for now. But if you want to create your own custom maps, these built-in maps will give you an idea of what they should look like. So from here, we'll make a few adjustments to dial this effect back in. First, set the blend mode back to screen, and then for the threshold, we'll adjust that to 0.3, and that basically takes the dark areas of the underlying footage and prevents the lens dirt effect from appearing in those areas. The higher you go with this, the smaller the affected area becomes. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. Now for the intensity, that just controls the general brightness of the lens dirt effect. I'm going to take that down a bit to 0.73. The higher you increase the intensity, of course, the more dramatic the effect becomes, but you want to keep it relatively subtle in most applications. Blur softens the light layer, which we looked at earlier with the copy of the ship. We'll set that to 10. You can see how you can still see the ship there, but the detail is softened out of it. And then the pivot angle affects only the duplicate of the footage, and that's going to blur it in a radial blur around the center of the frame. So as we increase that pivot angle, you can see how things just spread out in a blur around that center. So somewhere around 20 is probably good for that. And there's the effect. Of course, we could change the seed at any time if we wanted to just modify the specific dirt map being used. Typically, it's best to lean more toward subtle than toward extreme when using the lens dirt effect, as it can be a little distracting if you get too severe with it. And you don't typically want it to look like you used a rubbish lens to film with. You just don't want the lens to be so perfect that it looks artificial. The threshold setting can vary a lot based on the footage you're working with. The darker the footage, the lower you'll want to have the threshold set in most cases, and as the footage gets brighter, you'll want to boost that threshold a bit higher. The blur and pivot angle can generally be kept fairly low, but then again, you'll need to adjust them on a per-case basis. Well, there you have it. Now you know about lens dirt, so get out there and start using it. It's a particularly good companion to HitFilm 2 Ultimate's 3D model importing abilities, as lens dirt can really help sell the illusion that the entire scene was captured in camera. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.